Hey, I know what you're thinking. Fuji has a lot of lenses that are great for photographers. They have the 56 1.2, which is probably the most raved about, and then the 16 1.4, I know gets a lot of praise as well. But what about the 50 to 140 2.8? Is this Fuji's best lens? Now, to be clear, I haven't used every Fuji lens, and words like best is extremely subjective. But if you would like more full comparisons between Fuji lenses, I would recommend checking out Andrew and Danae's channel. They've had the opportunity to use way more Fuji lenses than I have, and Andrew even put together a little bit of an online calculator for you to figure out which lens makes sense for you and what your budget is, what you're trying to do with it, and being able to rank a couple of different categories, and it really makes a great recommendation. But for me, I own 4 different Fujifilm lenses and have rented one additional one a couple of times. And I recently did a full what's in my camera bag, so if you're interested in everything that I'm using, I'll link that up there and down in the description so you can check out that as well. Now, of the lenses I've used, the 50 to 140 is my favorite lens, but it is also my least used lens and most expensive lens. So why is it still in my kit? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. And I hope that by sharing my experience with this lens can help you decide if it's right for you and what you're trying to accomplish with your own photography. Now, the 50 to 140 is a 70 to 200 full frame equivalent. However, this is much smaller than those equivalents. I know when I used to shoot on the Nikon system, I had a Tamron 70 to 200 2.8, and this is a much smaller lens in terms of length as well as weight, and that can really make a difference. This focal range of 50 to 140 is really flexible and usable in a lot of situations. And with this lens, you even get a consistent 2.8 all the way through that zoom lens. And what makes this a premium lens is 2 things. It has both weather resistance, so if you take it outside and you're doing a lot of things, maybe in a little bit of rain or snow or out in the desert, you're not really gonna have to worry about that dust too much. And it also has OIS, or optical image stabilization. So taking some of those photos, if you have any motion or things like that, it's gonna help sharpen up those images. And this is a sharp lens, that is for sure. Now, I bought this lens for 3 main use cases: sports, wildlife, and headshots. So I have a friend who is a marathon runner, and I've met up with her many times to do running shots, sport shots, throughout the city of Chicago. Additionally, my wife and I really enjoy the outdoors and going to the national parks here in the US, and this is a great lens that I take to do some of that wildlife photography. Admittedly, this is not going to be a 400 or 600 millimeter lens, but this was what was good enough for me, as wildlife isn't necessarily my primary focus with photography. And then headshots is actually one of the main ways that I make money with photography. I have been able to do photos for personal LinkedIns as well as full teams at an office. And this lens exceeds my expectations for all 3 of those use cases. The issue is that all 3 of those use cases aren't everyday occurrences. This isn't a lens you're just gonna throw in your bag and might use it for some street photography that day. Now, on the sports side of things, my friend actually moved to Australia, so those photo shoots went away completely. And in terms of wildlife, this is a lens that I always have with me in the car when we're driving around national parks, and I've been able to make some great photos of wildlife that you can see from the road. But when we hit the trails, this lens stays in the car because it's heavy. It's big. It's not something I necessarily want to have on my back when we're hiking up a mountain and I don't know what we're going to see. So maybe the 55 to 200 would have been a better option, especially at half the cost, but you would have lost the f2.8 aperture as well as weather resistance. So just a little bit of a trade-off. And for headshots, this is a great lens. But is it the right lens when Fuji has a 90 f2, which is equivalent of a 135, that makes amazing photos and is extremely sharp? So for all 3 use cases, you might be wondering, Am I gonna sell this? Is this something I'm gonna switch to the 90 f2? Well, right now, no. This is gonna stay in my bag because this is just too good of a lens to even think about letting it go right now. I know that the images that I get when I am making photos with this lens are some of my favorite. And if I were to replace it with something like the 90mm, I feel like I'd also have to add the 50mm f2, and then you have two lenses and carrying more things around, and it just gets a little bit more complicated. Now, both of those lenses are on my long-term wish list, but right now swapping it out for this lens is not what I'm going to do. So make sure and hear me loud and clear that this lens is amazing. But if you're considering picking it up for yourself, just think about how often are you actually going to use this lens. And does it make sense to maybe rent this lens for those couple of occurrences as opposed to spending the money and having it in your bag all of the time? Otherwise, have a blast using it, and make sure and tag me in any photos that you make and post because I want to see them. I'm sure they're going to be just like Instagram bangers. You can tag me on both Instagram and Twitter at I'm Aaron Ross. I would love to see them. Also, let me know down in the comments what you think. Does this make sense, or does something like the 50 and the 90 combo make more sense? But on your way down to the comments, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, and until next week, remember to just get started.